What's up, everyone? So I was watching Inside the NBA on ESPN last night, and Shaq, Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith, and Ernie Johnson had this absolutely incredible segment breaking down the New York Knicks game against the Boston Celtics. And Charles said this game was genuinely absurd. Just one of the wildest endings he's seen to start an NBA season. The crew was going through everything that happened in this game and what it means for the Eastern Conference playoff race going forward. Ernie started things off by setting the stage for what everyone just witnessed. The Knicks and Celtics went down to the wire in what was supposed to be a statement game for both franchises, and what transpired in the fourth quarter, and especially in those final minutes, was just basketball chaos at its finest. Shaq jumped in immediately, saying he couldn't believe what he was watching unfold in real time, because this is the kind of game that tells you everything you need to know about where these two teams are, mentally and physically, to start the season. All right, everybody, listen up for just a second before we break down this insane Knicks situation. I need your help with something super simple that makes a massive impact. See that like button? That's basically your vote saying, yeah, I want more of this content. And here's the thing. YouTube's algorithm lives and dies by those likes. The more likes this gets, the more Knicks fans get to see this breakdown. The bigger this community grows. So do me a solid right now. Hit that like button before we go any further. 1 click, 1 second, but it genuinely keeps this whole thing going. DT? Charles wanted to break down the specifics of what made this game so absurd, because it wasn't just one play or one moment. It was a series of incredible plays, questionable coaching decisions, and just overall madness that you rarely see in a regular season game, let alone a season opener between two Eastern Conference contenders. Kenny agreed and said this game had legitimate playoff intensity from the opening tip, which is exactly what you want to see from a Knicks-Celtics rivalry matchup. The Inside the NBA crew talked about how the Knicks came out with tremendous energy and purpose, clearly trying to make a statement that they're legitimate contenders in the East. New York's ball movement was exceptional throughout the first 3 quarters, and the defensive effort was there consistently. Charles emphasized that what impressed him most was how the Knicks didn't back down from Boston's physicality at all. They matched it, and in some possessions exceeded it with their own intensity and toughness. Shaq wanted to talk about Karl Anthony Towns specifically because this was a huge test for Towns in his Knicks debut against one of the elite teams in the conference. Towns was dealing with that quad injury that everyone knew about, and you could see at times he was clearly playing through some discomfort. But Towns showed up when his team needed him, hitting some huge shots in the second half. Shaq said, "That's the kind of toughness and competitive fire the Knicks need from Towns all season long if they're going to make a deep playoff run." But then Kenny brought up what happened in the fourth quarter. And this is where things got genuinely absurd, according to the panel's analysis. The Knicks had built a comfortable lead going into the final period, looking like they were going to coast to a statement victory. But the Celtics, being the defending champions they are, weren't going anywhere without a fight. Boston started hitting shots from everywhere. The defensive intensity ramped up even more, and suddenly this comfortable Knicks lead started evaporating possession by possession. Charles said, "This is where coaching becomes absolutely critical," and he had some thoughts on how Mike Brown handled the end of this game. The Knicks made some questionable rotational decisions down the stretch, according to Charles's breakdown. There were moments where guys who were hot offensively got pulled out of the game, and guys who hadn't found their rhythm were left in during crucial possessions. Shaq agreed and said in playoff atmosphere games like this, you've got to ride your hot hand and not overthink the rotation. The crew showed specific film clips of the final 5 minutes, and Ernie walked through it possession by possession. There was a stretch where the Celtics went on like an 11-2 run in less than 3 minutes, and suddenly what was a 12-point Knicks lead was down to 3 points with under 2 minutes remaining. Kenny pointed out the Celtics' defensive adjustments were brilliant. They started trapping ball handlers at half court, forcing the Knicks into uncomfortable situations and rushed decisions. Then came the sequence that had everyone in the studio still talking about it. The Knicks were up 3 points with about 40 seconds left, and they had possession. This should be a situation where you milk the clock get a good shot, and essentially put the game away. Charles said this is where experience mattered, and some of the Knicks' younger guys showed their inexperience in this moment. Instead of working the clock down and getting a high-percentage look, the Knicks rushed into a contested three-pointer with way too much time left on the shot clock. The Celtics grabbed the rebound and immediately pushed it in transition. Shaq was breaking down the defensive breakdown on this possession. The Knicks weren't set defensively at all. Guys were still getting back, and Boston got a wide-open corner three to tie the game with 28 seconds remaining. The Garden went from absolutely electric to completely silent in the span of one possession. Kenny said that's the championship experience and poise that Boston has. They never panic, they just execute their offense and trust their system. Now, the Knicks had one final possession to win the game in regulation. Mike Brown called timeout to set up a play, and the Inside the NBA crew had different opinions on what should have happened here. Charles thought, you've got to get the ball to your best player, Jalen Brunson, and let him go to work in a pick-and-roll situation. That's what you pay your all-star point guard for, those moments where the game is on the line. Shaq had a different take. He wanted to see Karl Anthony Towns posting up and using his size advantage in that situation. Towns is 7 feet tall and can shoot over smaller defenders. Plus, with his shooting ability, you can't just send double teams without consequences. Kenny's perspective was more about just getting the best available shot, regardless of who takes it. Ball movement, player movement, and take what the defense gives you. What actually happened, according to the panel, was somewhere in between all those philosophies, and it didn't work out. The Knicks ran a play that ended up with Mikal Bridges taking a contested mid-range jumper that hit the front of the rim as time expired. Charles said, that's not necessarily a bad shot for Bridges. He can make that shot. But is that the shot you want in that moment? Is that the best look you could generate with your season opener on the line? The game went to overtime, and this is where things got even more absurd. The overtime period was just back-and-forth madness. Every possession felt like it had championship stakes attached to it. Shaq was impressed with how both teams continued to compete at such a high level despite having heavy legs and fatigue setting in. The Celtics looked like they were going to pull away a few times, but the Knicks kept responding with huge shots and defensive stops. There was one specific play in overtime that had the Inside the NBA crew rewinding and watching multiple times. OG Anunoby made this incredible defensive play where he switched onto Jason Tatum on the perimeter, stayed in front of him despite Tatum trying every move in his bag, and then recovered to contest the shot without fouling. Kenny called it one of the best defensive possessions he's seen all season, and that was just in Game 1. Charles said, that's the kind of two-way impact the Knicks were hoping to get from OG when they acquired him. And if he plays like that consistently, they're going to be a problem for everyone in the East. But then, on the very next possession, the Knicks turned the ball over on an unforced error. Just a bad pass that got picked off. The Celtics capitalized immediately with Jaylen Brown attacking the rim and getting an and-one opportunity. Shaq said, that's championship basketball right there. You force a turnover and immediately make your opponent pay for it on the other end. That's what separates good teams from great teams. The final minute of overtime was genuinely absurd, according to the panel. And this is where the absurd label really came from. There were something like 5 lead changes in the final 45 seconds of overtime. Every time one team scored, the other team had an answer. Brunson hit a step-back 3 to put the Knicks up 2. Then Derek White hit a corner 3 to put Boston up 1. Then Towns hit a turnaround jumper to put New York back up 1. Then Tatum drove and scored to put the Celtics up 1 again. Charles said he hasn't seen a game with that much back-and-forth drama in the final minute since some of the classic playoff battle. This was regular season basketball being played with elimination game intensity, and both fan bases were getting their money's worth. Ernie pointed out that this is exactly the kind of game the NBA wants to see. 2 legitimate contenders going at it with everything on the line. Neither team willing to give an inch. The final possession of overtime had the Celtics up by 1 point with 8 seconds left, and the Knicks had the ball. Mike Brown drew up another play, and the Inside the NBA crew was analyzing what options New York had in this situation. Charles thought you clear out and let Brunson go one-on-one. Live or die with your best player. Shaq wanted to see a pick and roll with Towns as the screener, because you're putting Boston in an impossible situation defending that action. What actually happened was, the Knicks ran a play designed to get Mikal Bridges a three-pointer coming off screens, but the Celtics defended it perfectly. Bridges caught the ball, but was heavily contested. Couldn't get a clean look, so he drove into the lane and tried to finish over two defenders. The shot was blocked by Al Horford, and the Celtics secured the rebound as time expired. Boston wins in overtime by 1 point in an absolutely absurd game. Kenny's immediate reaction was that this game told us both teams are legitimate championship contenders. The Knicks proved they can go toe-to-toe with the defending champs, and actually had multiple opportunities to win. The Celtics proved once again why they're the team to beat. They never panic, they execute down the stretch, and they find ways to win close games. Charles agreed, but said the Knicks have to be a little bit disappointed because they had that game won in regulation and let it slip away. Those are the kinds of games that come back to haunt you in the standings when you're fighting for playoff seeding. Shaq wanted to give credit to both coaching staffs because the adjustments throughout the game were really impressive. Joe Mazzulla made some great defensive adjustments in the second half that threw the Knicks off their rhythm. Mike Brown countered with some offensive wrinkles that got the Knicks good looks when they needed them. Kenny said, "This felt like a playoff chess match being played in Game 1 of the regular season, which just shows how high-level both of these organizations are." The panel talked about what this means going forward for both teams. For the Celtics, this was a good test and a good win, but they know they didn't play their best basketball and still found a way to win on the road in a hostile environment. That's championship DNA showing through. For the Knicks, Charles said, this has to be a learning experience. You can't let games slip away like that when you have double-digit leads in the fourth quarter. But at the same time, the fact that they competed at this level with key players dealing with injuries is genuinely encouraging for where this team can go. Shaq brought up Karl Anthony Towns playing through that quad injury as a major positive for New York. That's the kind of toughness and leadership the Knicks need from their star big man. If Towns is willing to play through discomfort in Game 1, that sets a tone for the rest of the roster about the standard of toughness expected. Kenny agreed and said the chemistry between Towns and Brunson looks really promising, even this early. There were multiple possessions where you could see them starting to develop that pick-and-roll chemistry that could be devastating once they get more reps together. The Inside the NBA crew wrapped up by saying, "This game lived up to all the hype, and then some." Ernie said, "If the rest of the Knicks-Celtics matchups this season are anything like this one, we're in for some incredible basketball." Charles predicted these two teams are going to meet in the Eastern Conference Final, and if this Game 1 matchup is any indication, that series is going to be an absolute war. Shaq agreed and said both teams have the talent, the coaching, and the mentality to make deep playoff runs. Kenny wanted to give a final shout-out to the crowd at Madison Square Garden because the atmosphere was absolutely electric all game long. That's what home court advantage is supposed to look like, and the Knicks are going to need that kind of energy from their fans all season long if they want to compete for a championship. The building was rocking for 53 minutes of basketball, and even though the Knicks came up just short, that's the kind of environment that makes MSG one of the toughest places to play in the entire league. So that was the full Inside the NBA breakdown of this genuinely absurd Knicks-Celtics game that went to overtime with multiple lead changes, questionable decisions, incredible plays, and championship-level intensity, despite being just Game 1 of the regular season.